Some of the most frequent questions that I get asked about on this channel have to do with personality tests. Things like, how are they different? What are they actually measuring? And which one is the most reliable and accurate? And since trait theory is one of my absolute favorite topics in all of psychology, today I want to answer those questions using two of the most well-known frameworks, which are the 5-factor model of personality, or Big Five, and the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, or MBTI. Now, these two approaches definitely come from very different psychological traditions, but interestingly, some of the personality tendencies that they measure actually do overlap. So let's go ahead and dive into them both, and then I'll explain how they relate to one another and get to all of the other questions. So first we have the 5-factor model, which is one of the most widely accepted frameworks in modern personality psychology altogether. It describes personality using 5 broad trait dimensions that reflect stable patterns in thinking, feeling, and behaving, which you can remember through the acronym OCEAN: openness to experience, conscientiousness, extraversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. In this framework, each of the traits represents a spectrum, so people can score higher or lower along each dimension rather than needing to fit into a single category. But what are these categories actually assessing, and how are they measured? Well, the scores on the traits are most commonly determined using tools like the Neo-Personality Inventory, which breaks each major trait into 6 smaller components known as facets. But let's look at the broader dimensions. The trait openness to experience is measuring curiosity, imagination, and receptiveness to new ideas and perspectives. It reflects a person's interest in intellectual exploration, creativity, aesthetic appreciation, and willingness to engage with unfamiliar concepts or experiences. Conscientiousness is measuring things like organization, reliability, and goal-directed behavior. It reflects how individuals regulate themselves in order to plan, follow through on responsibilities, and pursue long-term objectives in a structured and disciplined way. Now, extraversion is measuring social energy and engagement with the external world. It captures the degree to which a person is oriented towards social interaction, activity, stimulation, and the expression of positive emotion in interpersonal settings. Agreeableness is measuring interpersonal orientation, including tendencies related to cooperation, empathy, trust, and concern for others. It reflects how individuals approach relationships, particularly in terms of compassion, social harmony, and responsiveness to the needs of other people. And neuroticism is measuring emotional sensitivity and the tendency to experience psychological distress. It reflects the stability and reactivity of a person's emotional system, including how strongly and frequently individuals experience emotions related to stress, worry, and mood fluctuation. And because the Big Five measures traits along continuous scales, it allows us to describe personality with a lot of nuance. But let's go ahead and move on to the MBTI, which takes a very different approach. I think something that a lot of people don't know is that it was actually inspired by ideas from the Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung, who believed that people tend to favor different ways of perceiving information and making decisions. The test was, of course, later developed by Myers-Briggs, but that is where the original idea came from. Now, in this model, instead of measuring traits along a spectrum, it sorts people into personality types based on 4 psychological dimensions that include 2 possible preferences each. When these preferences are combined, they produce 16 possible personality types, represented by letter combinations such as INTJ, ENFP, or ISTP. So let's look at all 4 of these dimensions and talk about what they mean. So first we have introversion versus extraversion. This dimension measures where people primarily direct their energy. Introverts tend to focus inward, drawing energy from reflection and internal thoughts, whereas extroverts focus outward, gaining energy from interacting with people and engaging with their environment. Next we have sensing versus intuition. This measures how people take in information. Those with a sensing preference tend to focus on concrete, factual details and practical realities, whereas those with an intuition preference focus much more on patterns, possibilities, and abstract connections. Now, the third dimension is thinking versus feeling. This measures how people make decisions. Thinking types prioritize objective analysis, logic, and consistency, whereas feeling types prioritize personal values, harmony, and the impact of their decisions on other people. And lastly, we have judging versus perceiving, which measures how people interact with the outer world and structure their lives. Judging types prefer organization, planning, and closure, seeking to have things settled, whereas perceiving types prefer flexibility, spontaneity, and keeping options open. But again, it's the combination of preferences from all of these dimensions that end up giving you your 4-letter MBTI personality type. So these two tests really are pretty distinct, but like I said earlier, even though they come from very different theoretical backgrounds, several of their dimensions do overlap. For example, both models directly measure extraversion versus introversion, which is the most obvious, but another overlap appears between the Big Five trait openness to experience and the MBTI dimension of intuition versus sensing. Now, these aren't identical traits, but people who score high in openness tend to enjoy things like ideas, imagination, and novelty, which does resemble the intuitive style that's described in the MBTI. There's also some weaker relationships between agreeableness and the MBTI feeling preference, as well as between conscientiousness and the judging dimension of the MBTI, which also relates to organization and structure. However, there is one very important personality dimension that the MBTI does not measure very directly at all, which is neuroticism. And this means that two people could have the exact same MBTI personality type, but still differ widely in how anxious, moody, or resilient they are. So in other words, while the MBTI can accurately tell us about our preferences, it can't tell us much about how we handle emotions or stress, which definitely does have an influence on how we think and behave. So because of these differences, psychologists usually view the Big Five as the more scientifically robust model of personality, which is why we use it so often in peer-reviewed research. I think one of the biggest issues with the MBTI is that it forces people into categories, even though in real life, personality traits tend to exist along continuous spectrums. For example, many people fall right near the middle of introversion and extraversion instead of being one clear type. But the test doesn't allow you to reflect that. You have to pick either or. The test has also faced a lot of criticism regarding reliability because sometimes people will take the test multiple times, but then are assigned different personality types every single time they take it. Still, I wouldn't say that the MBTI is entirely pseudoscience. I do think it has value. I think it can help us with self-reflection and help us to understand our preferences. And I also think it's a great tool for helping us understand other people. I love when people tell me their MBTI type because it automatically helps me know where they're coming from. And I have always personally found the test to be very accurate in my own case. My MBTI type has never changed the dozens of times I've taken the test over the years. I am an ENFP. I have been an ENFP every single time I've taken the test, and I fit that description 100%. But even still, I wholeheartedly agree that the MBTI lacks the reliability, validity, and predictive power of trait-based models, which is why for true psychological research, the Big Five really is the gold standard. So I truly hope that this explanation and comparison was helpful. I would love to hear which test you prefer and what your personality type is in the comments, so definitely let me know down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.